Hi, I am Raina Gilead, and I am here with Dr. Nicole Hirsch to discuss the past, present, and future of diverse contributions to the AEC industry. This is our fireside chat, and today we're here to talk about cultural competency. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Raina. I love that we're talking about this because, it came up just kind of organically in a conversation you and I were having about tools that are helpful and effective in this industry and really across industries. And so I'm excited to dig into this today.
Me too. I love when things come up that end up being something that we can use to talk about with other people. So,
Absolutely.
one of the questions I have, because I had to ask you this, is what exactly is cultural competency?
A great question. Essentially, cultural competency, and I take this definition from the American Psychological Association, is more or less kind of the ways and strategies, tools we have at our disposal to be able to collaborate, work with, understand groups that are different than ourselves. And that can be a cultural group, religious, socioeconomic. It can fall along different lines of difference, but it's really about being able to extend some understanding to be able to work effectively with people who are different than yourself.
Love that.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's, well, first of all, it's just cool in general. But the thing that's really cool is that Luster is one of those companies that has people from all different backgrounds coming together.
Absolutely. So
So,
many different, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, different lived experiences and backgrounds. Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's interesting about cultural competency is it really grows out of the civil rights movement. It's comes from a time, really thinking about the 60s and the 70s when people are thinking about like diversifying different workforces or industries, and then how do we do that effectively and work together well?
yeah. And some things absolutely work, other things we're still learning how to
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, and I think another piece that's really interesting and crucial to understand about cultural competency is that every group is going to be different. So there's no one size fits all for understanding how do we work collaboratively or across difference. Um, I think the other thing that I wanted to just point out is that it's so important, particularly when we're thinking about AEC. Some of the statistics I came across recently are that Hispanics and Latinx represent 18% of the US population, but 30% of the construction industry. And so when we're thinking about those numbers, and that's a growing number. So the construction industry itself is one that is an extremely diverse industry and increasingly so.
Right. Wow. Fascinating.
It is
Fascinating.
fascinating. I agree. I also wanted to share a study that I came across by Minerva Bonilla and Chuma Naji, who are out of Texas A&M. They published a literature review study, so looking at a bunch of different studies last year in 2024. And one of the things that they really point to is that, first off, when we think about cultural competency, it's often talked about in industries like education or healthcare settings. It's not talked about as frequently in the AEC industry, or they're thinking about construction specifically. But because of the numbers that I just said, it's actually super helpful and relevant to this industry. And what they point out are that the benefits include increased improvements to communication, better collaboration, and better overall project outcomes. So it really does provide some bang to your buck to invest in cultural competency. And people do that through, trainings or readings. There are workshops, lots of ways to engage.
That's wonderful. I love it. Very relevant. Um,
I've given some of the like kind of nerdy academic uh, overview of cultural competency, but I think it's also helpful to understand like how does this work in practice? And I wanted to ask you, Raina, as a professional who works in this industry, if you have any examples or personal experience with it.
I do. Actually, well, there's two examples that I could give you, and they're kind of like one is something I experienced that sort of occurred to me, and then something that I feel like I could have done better at, right? My own sort of ignorance within cultural competency. So, one is that, and this is related within the industry, both of these stories. So, they're both kind of surrounding community organizing, surrounding different events. This first one had to do more so with a really busy street and trying to figure out safety protocols and sort of bringing in the community to get their opinions about what to do and what was best. So, where the meeting was actually being held was at this community center, and it happened to be really close to where I grew up. So, I'd mentioned this to my supervisor at the time. This is also not a luster story. I want to be very clear. This is not anything to do with luster. Okay. So, my supervisor at the time was aware that I'd grown up in the area, and you could actually see the buildings where I grew up from the place where we were holding the event. And so she says to me, she's like, "Oh, so you grew up in the projects right over there?" And I was shocked, first of all. And then I just said no politely. But it was a comment that actually really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think based also on the fact that she was my supervisor at the time, I didn't really feel like I could say anything or that I could defend myself or that I even was allowed to have sort of normal, natural emotions surrounding that comment and what kind of came up for me around that, which was difficult. So,
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm so sorry that you had that experience. I think that is illustrative of, a supervisor who isn't practiced at cultural competency. And I think what you raise is as a Black woman, having the stereotype that you must also have grown up in some kind of poverty or government assisted housing. And I think that's one of the things that cultural competency helps us to uncover is, to be more sensitive and aware of the stereotypes associated with different groups and how to have conversations where we're not making those kinds of assumptions that actually might um, either bring up feelings of, I would imagine, resentment or lack of recognition of who you are as an individual, or possibly shame if you did grow up in that way and it's seen as a lesser or negative experience. So,
yeah, I'm glad you brought up the second point because I also just want to point out that there is nothing wrong with growing up in the projects. That is not the point. And had I told her that I grew up in the projects and then mentioned, "Oh, I grew up near this area," that would have been an appropriate thing to say. You know what I mean? Had I felt like that was appropriate, then that's appropriate. So
right.
it's also nuanced, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so the second story, because I just want to bring some humility to it, because we're all human, last time I checked. So for me, I've also been guilty of not exhibiting the best cultural competency at times. There was a completely separate project that I was working on, once again, not with luster, and but within the industry. And at the time, we were looking at materials and how to reach the most people within that community. So we were looking at making sure we had material in different languages. And so one of the languages that we were going to cover was Cantonese. And so I had mentioned to a coworker, I said, "Oh, will you be doing the translation? Because we had the English version already. Are you going to be doing the translation in Cantonese?" And she very politely said, I don't speak Cantonese and I don't write or read Cantonese. But I do speak Mandarin. And it's one of those putting your foot in your mouth situations. And these situations first can be very uncomfortable, like within your own body, and feeling like, "Oh, why did I say that?" But it was a learning lesson. And at that time, I apologized and I said, "I'm so sorry. You know, and And it ended up being fine because obviously I also took accountability, which is another, I'd say, important piece of this is to just
Absolutely.
recognize when you have made an error, and you've made an assumption.
Yeah.
So it ended up being fine. But I think even in both stories, I think the really important thing to remember is that, especially in the workplace, these are people that you're going to see tomorrow. These are people that you're going to be working on, especially in AEC, multiple different projects. And that resentment can carry on into the next project, which, like you said, then affects the work.
Hmm.
And the work is important because the work is not about me. It's not about you. It's about completing the work. So the more that we kind of have some appropriate language and some appropriate skills and a skill set towards cultural competency, the better the work outcome is.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, thank you for sharing that second story because we all make faux pas, right? And I think one of the things that I have often shared in my trainings that I do because often am brought in as the person to help kind of facilitate the learning around cultural competence or related kinds of trainings that help us to build cultures of belonging with our teams and our workplaces is that, we all make mistakes. Some mistakes carry this moral judgment that we may feel. Like if you bump into somebody with your grocery cart at the grocery store, it's very easy to say, "Oh, my mistake. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Right? And sometimes when we say things that we think may reflect poorly on us as like good, kind human beings, it becomes much harder to say that sorry. But that repair piece is key. And I think to your point, what is the ultimate goal of cultural competency is really we're building workplaces where everyone feels seen and valued and like they belong. And at the end of the day, when we feel those things, we're going to do better work.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that story and for sharing how you repaired
Yeah.
when you did make an assumption.
Because, I think that one of the things that I really value about Luster is one team, one family. And I would hope that other companies, not even just within AEC, but even out of that, attempt to be a semi-family unit of sorts. Because I say that to say I come from a very diverse family. I know you do as well. And so, there's times where a family member may say something that's a little to the left or to the right. And with that, because you're family, because you share, familiar spaces like Christmas and Thanksgiving and things like that, you can have those conversations or you can work through those uncomfortable feelings. And I think the workplace is one of those places. If it's a successful workplace, you can do the same thing.
Absolutely. I agree. And we have people on our team that help create that magic. So, you can always partner with Lester to bring greater cultural competence to your team.
Absolutely. Or hire Nicole as well, for that cultural competence reboot.
Absolutely.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you for this, I think, very helpful conversation about something that is beneficial kind of everywhere, not just the workplace, certainly not just the AEC industry, but I think that it's helpful for us all to share these stories and to think about how we can be better colleagues, collaborators, and partners in this work.
Absolutely. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll talk to you next time.
Yes.
Bye.